Hello, gentlemen. Happy New Year 2024. It's good to see you all. Savan with his wild hair is like those
Wild hair.
those of you who
Yeah,
are on the
really?
pod listening, you can't see it. Oh, there we go. He kind of got it.
I got my twist. I'm trying to take my twists out because it's time to take them out. But good lord, it's a lot of work. I just need.
Well,
somebody
welcome
to
back,
do this for me.
Brian. You were in
You're
international
supposed to have a
travel.
girlfriend doing that for you, man. Isn't that how
Trying,
it
dog.
works?
It's hard out here.
The
I'm
apps.
just a
It's
lonely
all about
boy.
the apps.
I'm just sorry, you married clowns. Sorry, I can't be like y'all.
You know,
I
I
would
definitely
simply-
have Anna take out my twist.
We all did a little bit of traveling over the winter holiday season. Sav, you went back to New Orleans for a bit, right?
Yeah, I went home for the holidays, just hanging out with the family. You know what I'm saying? Stuffing my face with food, hanging out with Nala the dog.
We didn't get any Nala the dog content on IG though.
Oh yeah, it's because honestly, me and my precious little love muffin, little chicken nugget, were too busy just hanging out.
Just hanging out.
Just love nesting the whole time.
Yeah, the whole time.
There's no time for phones.
No, I was posted up the whole time. I was playing God of War Valhalla, and Nala was on the couch next to me, just vibed out, sleeping, snoring, just vibing out. It was great.
Love it. Wait, God of War
Coincidentally.
Yeah, they had that. You ain't heard about that free DLC that came out for the new God of War?
No.
It was an
How
epilogue to the. Oh, it was amazing. It was it was like this sweaty roguelite. That's an epilogue for the game. Oh, it was so sick.
Awesome. Brian, you were in a quadruply different time zone from us. I heard he went to Guam, although Brian sent us no pictures of Guam.
So there's no proof that I was actually there. I was just conveniently away and excommunicated from you guys for 3 weeks. And it was blessed.
All right. I made him download I made Brian download a brand new app so that we could communicate because he didn't have.
Oh my god.
He only had Wi-Fi access. He didn't have his internet, because he was traveling internationally.
Y'all got WhatsApp or some shit?
Well, yeah, that's what I suggested, and of course, our host over here was like, "Oh no, but that's owned by Facebook and Meta." I'm like, "Dude, you're on Instagram. Get over it."
Did you see all those permissions though? You gotta let them see everything from your phone in order to download WhatsApp. Like, no thanks.
Oh,
let them look.
God.
Nah, I don't need them in my phone. I don't need them.
So now we're on. Now we're on Signal.
Now we're on Signal, which is very, very encrypted.
Isn't Signal all by the same people too?
No, Signal's different. And you don't need to give any permissions. It's terrific.
Now I feel like we are some sleeper cell that's trying to be low key away from the government.
Oh yeah, no, Brian.
Signal is what I used to make illicit. Signal is what people use to make illicit purchases.
Exactly.
Oh, is that what it's for?
Yes.
I thought they use Telegram.
There's criminal activity that happens on Signal, for sure.
Brian made us turn on the feature where your messages disappear after a certain amount of time. So,
well, if you're going to use Signal, you might as well use Signal. You know what I mean?
Why would you get Signal and then not use its defining purpose and feature?
No, the defining purpose is that it's encrypted so that no one else outside of the chat can see it. So it doesn't matter.
Levels of security. If I'm
it doesn't matter whether it disappears. It doesn't matter whether it disappears. But anyways,
don't you love that messages self-destruct?
Wes is paranoid as if he does and sells drugs, but he wants to use the resource. What's the kind of dude who will get a money counter for actually counting money? Or he would get like one of those little scales, like a little mini micro scale, and actually use it for like measuring stuff in the kitchen.
Hey. If I had wheels, I'd be a bicycle. All right, let's keep going. All right, this episode we're gonna talk about Echo. That was a chance for you guys to say Echo. Yeah, exactly. Come on. It's like we didn't plan this. So we return to the story of Maya Lopez, played by Alaqua Cox, who we first saw show up last, was it 2 years ago, I think, in Hawkeye. She was a side character in that show. What did we think? How did we feel about her coming into this episode? Sav, what were you thinking?
Yeah, she was a solid side character. I enjoyed her quite a bit in Hawkeye. She was actually a solid, deuteragonist type character when you had Kate and Clint, and she has her whole side stuff going on in her backstory. Like, she wasn't the most interesting in that show, but she played an entertaining role, and I just liked the uniqueness of her character. So she never stood out as, oh, this is my favorite, but she always had potential, and I can't wait to discuss, how she does as a lead. But I was excited for her.
Nice.
Do
Brian?
people remember Hawkeye? My goodness, that was a long time ago.
It was, but I mean, the first episode did a solid job of recapping the basics of, you not having to watch Hawkeye, but at least know what happens. But Hawkeye, I thought, aged kind of well, if I'm gonna keep it a bean with y'all, but that's a whole nother conversation.
I just remember the pizza dog, and then doesn't Hawkeye jump out the window and like fireman slide down the tree or something like that?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
that was
in
so
his defining
awesome.
moment,
Oh,
Alone
good times.
style.
yeah, buddy.
I was actually really excited for Echo. Well, I would say I was pretty excited for Echo because she's just the fighting that they did in that show was really cool. And then also that she's bringing in some other things like being deaf. And so that's going to affect her ability to fight. So it kind of gives some like really interesting ways in which the character can move as a character, but also ways she can move as a fighter and in the choreography. So I was pretty excited. I thought this could be good. And then I heard that they were only going to do 5 episodes and it was going to be all released at once. And some of the things I saw a while ago were like, yeah, it feels really like Disney and Marvel are just sort of like trying to kind of get whatever they've already made. They're just kind of trying to get out before they do kind of their retreat and reset that they've been working on. It was kind of like, hey, Echo's already in the can. Let's go ahead and release it, but like let's not make as big a deal about it because we know it's not our best stuff. That was kind of the hypothesis. So I was a little bit had lower expectations for this one, given that I thought, well, maybe they're sort of just trying to hide it or like not exactly, make this thing the best that it could be. They were just sort of like, well, we already made it, so let's go ahead and release it. But they weren't that excited about it.
But at
I
the
don't know.
same time, this also has the new Marvel Spotlight moniker on it.
Yeah.
And it's touted as their first TVMA show. So it's not only on Disney Plus, but it's also on Hulu. So
That's what
we're
built the hype
getting
for
mixed
me.
messages here about how they feel about it.
Yeah.
I think them going TVMA was, to me, the sign that they are actually excited and kind of putting in some extra effort to this show because...
Ooh, sexy. I love it. Get close to that mic, Sav.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Seriously, I think them going TVMA...
Yeah, we're going MA right now.
And there's a question where we're going to talk about that, but I think that they had faith in the show when they announced that it was TVMA because that just draws a different type of audience and that just sets a different type of tone of what they can do storytelling-wise, and I think they gave them more creative direction to be able to tell the story that they wanted to tell rather than being limited by the tone and what you can and can't do, especially for characters who, in a character storyline that leans around the more brutality and criminal underworld rather than the more whimsical side of the Marvel universe. So like, I think them going TVMA, releasing it all at once is actually a good call because it makes it accessible to people who might not be super interested, and you're not going to get them to watch it week by week. But if it's just a quality show and it just is good, period, then people will just immediately be won over, which, that's, I think, what we're going to discuss today.
And for those that don't know, Echo is a spin-off character from the world of Daredevil in the comics, right? So, Daredevil blind, so of course there's, this villain or anti-hero type character who's deaf. But grounded characters, underworld, a lot of physical, low-level violence, and so I think they're also trying to, they were trying to echo,
but
Marvel's Daredevil show, right?
All the Netflix shows were TVMA.
Which was very MA, right? And so they're trying to piggyback off of that with Echo by saying like, oh, this is part of that thing. Remember that, and remember Kingpin. We're making this character who exists in that terrain, along with Daredevil and the other Defenders.
Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, all of those were street level heroes, but because you're not saving the world, they leaned into the maturity element of it to really what makes it stand out compared to the PG-13 world of a lot of the other mainstream Marvel stuff, which even for the Netflix shows that was one of the best calls they ever made. So knowing that they're replicating this energy to me is a good sign for the show.
I agree. I really liked most of the Netflix shows. I think I don't know if we've talked about them on the show. Maybe that was predating our podcast.
That was
Pre,
that was before our pod.
Pre-pan,
Well,
pre-pod.
Yeah, pre-pan.
Good God.
Luke Cage was very sexy. He was what a hunk. All right.
I went back and
Michael Coulter. That's a good looking dude.
Mahershala Ali. I think that might have been the first thing I ever saw him in.
Yeah, Luke Cage.
And he was awesome.
He was really good.
So like I went back after. So I
Did you?
finished Echo, right, and I went back and watched that Jessica Jones bit with her and Luke Cage, and when they're hanging out and doing more than hanging out. And that is truly TVMA.
Oh,
They
you saw
break
some
the
peen?
bed. They break the bed. You don't see any of the pee. But you do see you see the lines. You know the lines that lead into the.
Yeah. Also, people get brutally murdered on screen. Are we forgetting that, like, in Daredevil, we see Kingpin smash his dad's head into a car door? Like, these Netflix shows didn't shy away from the brutality, and frankly, neither does Echo. So,
yeah, he smashed somebody's head. It wasn't his dad. His dad he smashed with a hammer or something.
oh, you're right. No, the door was
Yeah.
like a goon who pissed him off.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
bad. Different violent on-screen murder.
Yeah, many on-screen violent murders. And Dave. I don't know why we're doing this retrospective. Maybe we should just talk about the Defenders. David Tennant's turn as that guy that was like mind controlling people. Holy cow, that
The
was
Purple
so
Man.
good.
Oh, that was terrifying.
That first
Yeah.
season of Jessica Jones. I don't think any of them replicated that in terms, like even with Wilson Fisk in Daredevil. I don't think it got there.
Yeah.
And
It's a whole nother
Punisher
level
could
of
have had.
dark.
I don't even know who was the main villain in that one. It was kind of the friend, but I don't remember if he was even the main villain. Anyways, let's keep going.
Jigsaw, he was on the slick.
But so I just bring that up
TVMA, we like it.
to say, like, yes, Echo is TVMA because they use blood packets in certain fights and whatnot. But to me, it feels almost exactly the same as the other Disney Plus Marvel shows. Like like content wise, like not even in terms of what's MA rated, like stuff that could be censorable or whatever, but in terms of how the content is treated, it just kind of it felt like Hawkeye. It felt like when what's that Winter Soldier one called? I don't even remember anymore.
Falcon and
the Winter Soldier. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, okay.
The
I thought
exception
people
that I can
people got
think
shot in
of,
the head on screen. Like people got blocked.
Yeah.
Like one
But
dude got
not in a grisly way. It's
Yeah,
sort of just like it happens a few times.
the guy at the skate depot, right? Like that's probably the most brutal moment.
But it also just felt tacked on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the one in the alleyway.
It
where
didn't
Kingpin-
feel like it was really part of the show's tone and ethos.
Right. Those two felt a little bit separate. Do you remember where I think
it was a
maybe-
soft TVMA. It's a very
This may
soft
be-
TVMA.
All right. But I think in general, I agree with Sav. We're kind of, we got something a little bit grittier in this one than they didn't have to pull punches when they didn't want to, I think, which was nice here.
Yeah.
All right. So this is our real question. Let's see if we can pull this off, gentlemen. Behind the scenes, let's see. All right. Maya was a side character before, and especially because of her being deaf, her dialogue and general communication have to be a little bit different. How is she done as the lead for you, Brian?
Alaqua Cox, Maya, is a solid lead. And mostly because she just has the look, right? She, the black leather jacket, the stoic stone face, the black matte motorcycle, and somebody willing to kick ass, right? So she just looks like the type of anti-hero that you want to ride along with. And then on top of that, she's communicating with facial expressions and ASL, which I think, adds a lot of intensity to her interactions with people, and gives us a different flavor than other heroes that we've seen before.
Sav.
Yeah, same deal. She's a good lead. They do a good, like, the casting is great where she just has this aura of badassery that really sells you on a lot of the feats that she's pulling off in the show. She, the fact that a lot of characters or people don't realize that she can't hear, and they do a good job of doing the POV swapping of what she's hearing, which is nothing. But then when she's engaging with folks who actually do communicate, know how to understand with her, she sells me on just her stoic badass nature and backs it up, and even how they built her up in Hawkeye of just her having good hands and being able to beat the crap out of people, like, but still take licks. I think the casting and the good blend of her body language acting and actual ASL with people she knows, and usually the ASLs with characters she's close with, so you get to see the emotional range, is done very well, and it's refreshing and it's different. And I had my concerns about her as a lead, but I think this combined with the tone of the show really makes her a good carry. She's never on screen I'm like, oh, let's keep it moving, get her off screen. She steals the show in my opinion in her scenes.
Nice. Brian, did you want more from her in some ways? Or like something different?
So I think she has great screen presence and is an interesting character. I think the show though does her a disservice by not giving her more to do, or they don't build a full they don't really build full motivation around what she's doing, what her objectives are. Like this whole thing about her trying to be the queen pin and get hers too, like it doesn't even make any sense in context of all the stuff that they show us. Like she was angry that Kingpin got her dad killed. She shot Kingpin. Now she's going after his empire, like, but doing it in Oklahoma. Like none of that makes sense, right? And so I don't think that the show knew exactly what to do with the character, and I think that Echo is interesting, and that there are bones of like a lot of things that are ripe for great storytelling in this that they're throwing out. But I don't know that they've really found the proper way to tell this story in these 5 episodes, at least.
Oh no. I feel like I've now I don't know why I didn't think about what you just said, but now I'm like, man, you're right. That it doesn't make sense. Why is she why is she in Oklahoma? It's because they wanted to tell a story around her ancestors and her history and her parents
Yeah,
and
which
her
is
grandparents.
great.
Yeah.
But totally
But then-
unmotivated.
Yeah, but then that doesn't have anything to do with Kingpin.
And yeah, and then like you know what story they're trying to tell, and then they're just shoehorning it into these boxes.
Oh no! Ruin the show for me, Brian.
It's like it's very obvious what they're trying to do, right? And like they give you the flashback with her mom die and the family gets separated. They're totally telegraphing what payoff they want at the end. Of course, she's going to reunite with her family at the end, and all of that makes for a less sincerely gritty version of the character that could be possible. And that dynamic between her and Kingpin could be so much more heightened if they weren't also just trying to contrive these other things happening around her.
Sav, you agree with that?
It definitely seemed to, like, not necessarily. I don't know if I agree with that.
Tell him why he's wrong.
I mean, no, it's not that it's wrong. It's just like the motivations part actually, to me, how I see her motivation. I haven't finished the show though. I'm only, I'm more than halfway. I'm 3 out of 5 episodes in, but the way I see it is that she's, how do I word this? Like,
she's a badass.
I see what they're going for, but I think that they should have leaned more into the moral ambiguity of her character. And maybe the next 2 episodes they will. I don't know. I haven't finished the series, but the way I interpret it was that you think that she's actually going to be chill after the ending of Hawkeye, knowing how she's supposed to let go of revenge. But it turns out that doesn't magically, or letting go of her hate of Clint, but it turns out it doesn't magically, what he said at the end didn't actually sink in with her. Like, it sunk in with the letting go of her hate towards him, but all she really did was redirect that hate towards Kingpin and didn't really learn. Yeah, she didn't really learn a lesson. And I think that's okay, but I think the show could do a better job of selling us on that. And maybe they're trying to, because there's a line of saying, hey, you sound like Kingpin, but like I think an interesting character arc is her basically still being a part of the problem. Like, yeah, just because Kingpin's bad doesn't mean that you're good. So I hope that they lean into that. Like, she makes a good. I hope they don't. I don't like when they take anti-heroes and lean too much into the hero part. Lean more into the anti side of things for her, because which I like. So far, what I like with her so far is that she kind of could just go in and do shit without regard of some of the consequences of her actions, which I think is a dope character trait. Like the way she got Biscuit caught up in all that stuff with the truck, and how even I assume that's like her uncle, right? The dude who run the skating ring. I think that's like her uncle or something.
It's her dad's brother.
Yeah, like I thought a cool element of her character is that you so caught up just trying to do your thing that you're causing problems for your family and the folks around you. I just hope the show leans into that more these next 2 episodes, but there's only so much time you have to do that. But I think the potential of her being this anti-hero, but still very much like if there was a hero, they wouldn't be agreeing with her, could work. But you don't want to soften her up and make her too sympathetic either. She works best for me so far when she's not super sympathetic, because she's still a badass and you're rooting for her, but you can fully acknowledge, hey, he said you're bringing a war here and causing problems, and he's high-key right. Like, everyone's like, oh yeah, Maya's back in town, hope she don't come in and cause problems, and it's like, oh no, everyone was right, you're absolutely coming in causing problems, even if you feel justified in your actions. So I don't know, I like it, it's just a matter of what they're gonna do with it. I hope they don't try and soften her up too quickly, because she kills people on screen, and like she's not nice, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Like, that makes for a compelling character.
All right. We'll see if you get what you want.
I mean, you were about to say he was going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
It's only 5 episodes.
Yeah, so I don't expect... Like,
there's not a lot that they could do there.
Yeah. But, I don't know. That's what I like the most about her character so far, is that she is kind of low-key taking advantage of her family's kindness and all that in the early half of this, and that makes for an interesting character. But it seems like they don't stick that based on what you were hinting at. But like, I think they have the outlines to what you were saying of a really dope character. And if that is the case, then Brian, I think that reinforces your point of they're not doing the character justice by maybe making them too sympathetic when you can lean into their grittier, more ambiguous side.
I don't mind the way they went, because ultimately they decided the show was going to be an investigation of Echo's past and her relationships with her family, and so that's where they spend, their time. And sure, you could spend time on, like, you could do a prequel, right, where you spend time on what did she actually do as an assassin, what did she actually struggle with, and how did her rage really like fuel that stuff. That's not necessarily what this show was designed to be about. So yeah, I don't think it's spoiler to say like that's not necessarily where they focus, even if that's where you wanted them to focus. And I don't think that precludes them from doing that later on, but that's just not where this show ended up going. I wanted to talk a little bit about, I
was just going to say, like, imagine that they didn't insert Kingpin into the story, and then she just got into some mishaps when she went home to Oklahoma, right? Like that could have been a very interesting story on its own. But the fact that they have, all these requirements to bring in other characters and try to tie things together, it leaves all the threads straining.
Well, I'll watch the next 2 today, and I'll have a better idea. But fair enough.
Yeah, and Kingpin is a little bit closer in terms of his attitudes to when we saw him in Daredevil, a little bit more than he is when we saw him in Hawkeye. They
he's
have
not
him
wearing
back
the Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah, he's back in the big suits and all that good stuff.
The Hawaiian shirt is his classic fit. You tripping?
Boo.
Yeah, it just didn't fit the gritty nature, I think, and I don't know how we had seen him in Daredevil was pretty awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit about, the wokeness of the show. So I wanted to get you.
No, we are not using that term. I still remember the days in college when woke was like very much before it was co-opted.
Yeah,
we are not going to use this damn
I'm using
bastardized,
sarcastically,
co-opted version of woke.
Yeah, I'm using it sarcastically in the Tucker Carlson kind of way or the Ted Cruz kind of way.
We cannot do that.
And what I really liked about the show, and I don't I don't mind. I'm gonna re-co-opt it back. This show has a lead who is deaf, who has Native ancestry, and who is also an amputee, right? And so checks a lot of the boxes, as the Fox News guys might say. How did that play for you, right? Like having a show that incorporated all of those things and put some of them front and center at different times. How does that sort of work for you, or how did you think the show executed that, I guess, is really more what I'm trying to say. Brian, how have you found those different pieces that are kind of not the kind of dominant culture? How did you find that?
I love the non-dominant culture. I mean, if you listen to the show, you know that I love
But how do you think the show is doing
Reservation
it, right? Like,
Dogs.
yeah.
But yeah, like I think that Echo, clearly they had an agenda with Echo, right? They wanted to be able to talk about her as a person who's Native American, who comes from a Native American community, and like to show that and show other characters, right? I think it's very clear that that's the kind of show that they wanted to have, but through a Marvel vehicle. And I think for the most part, it's pretty effective, right? Like in the same way that Reservation Dogs is also effective. They just plant you in a community. I mean, both take place in Oklahoma, different tribes, but they plant you in that community. It's not just about the individual hero, the protagonist, but it's about the community that surrounds them. So you get to spend time and meet, grandma, of course, and uncle and cousin, and also talk about ancestry and heritage, and where people who are not part of a non-dominant culture get their strength from, right? It's very often about ancestors, and recognizing those struggles, and how that makes you a strong individual. So all of that comes into the fore in this show. And as much as you can tell, it's definitely kind of like a virtue signaling agenda. It still feels sincere. Like I don't mind it at all. Like I appreciate it because it adds a richness to the story that wouldn't otherwise be there. And you get to be in a different community that for most of us we don't have contact or interaction with on a regular basis. So it's refreshing and insightful.
Sav, do you want to respond about her indigenous background? You can also talk about her being deaf or being an amputee.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I like with it is that I don't even see it as like a tick boxes virtual signaling way, because that's not the main stuff that carries the story. These are just elements of the background to make it a cool backdrop. But even from these first few episodes that I've seen, the heaviest moments and coolest moments of the show are more about them just interacting as a family, like it's Maya's relationship with, is it Bonnie?
Yeah,
the cousin.
Her cousin, yeah, like
Bonnie.
the relationship with Bonnie, the one with Biscuit, the one with the grandma, the one with the dad, the uncle, the certain part of the family involved in a criminal background, some of them not. Like that ain't got diddly squat to do with their native ancestry. It paints a backdrop of the things happening around them, but like that's not what moves the story forward. And so to me, when it's like that, I don't see that as like some type of virtual signaling. Hey, look at how inclusive we are. I see it as to your original point. We tell diverse stories that take place in different communities, but it's really more about being estranged from family. It's about Maya being hyper independent to the point of it being an actual character flaw. Like some of that background stuff might inform it a little bit, but that's not what's driving the vehicle. Maya as a character is hyper independent, wants to do her own thing, doesn't want to drag people into her own stuff. And her being indigenous and amputee and deaf might, it might have unique ways that plays out, but those things could all not be traits of her character, and she would still be the core things that make her, at least what I think, badass and cool, would still be there. She still wants revenge against Kingpin. She still feels anger about losing her father and who was responsible and all of that. So what I like with the show is that I think they had a good foundation of the tone and character, and then a lot of the other stuff that makes the show unique and inclusive and talk about different stories feels very organic. Like, one of my favorite parts of the show was how they, and maybe we're getting to some soft spoiler territory, but we can avoid spoiling it for folks because I think it's a cool reveal. But the flashbacks that happen at the beginning of every episode about someone who's from Maya's indigenous bloodline, going back from their cultural origin story to people in like the, I don't know, ancient times to like the early 1900s, and then them tying that into the actual modern show in a dope way. Like, to me, I love that because you're getting to do these cool creative set pieces and sequences, and it gets to show cool elements of the culture in different contexts, but they still very much meaningfully tie it back to the main story and the character. Like, to me, all of that was really, really well done. And even Maya's struggles as like an amputee, like, it's cool for context of unique struggles she goes to, but it's not like, it doesn't feel unnatural. It feels like this is Maya's skill set, what she can and can't do, and this is how it plays out. Like, even her not being able to hear never really feels like they never really treat it like it's an actual disability. They just show, hey, this is what's going on from Maya's perspective. And I don't know. To me, it makes it feel very authentic, and you'd have to be a real hater to just see this and think, oh yeah, they're just trying to pander to people. I'm like, dog, if you think this is pandering, you're just a hater.
Yeah, the being deaf part opened up the sound designers to be really creative with how they played with volume and heartbeats and music within scenes, and I thought that was cool. It kind of gave them another reason to give us more senses like within the show. Something I think, I don't know, Brian, maybe you're an editor, you might know how hard or easy that kind of thing is. But that was cool to see them incorporate some of that in there. And it didn't feel trite. It felt like, oh, there's an actual reason why we're getting these like differences in volume, at different parts, and it played with the story and it helped tell the story. Brian, what you were saying around her being back at home and how those conflicts would have happened, I was thinking too, like, her and her dad left the community when she was pretty young. I mean, she looked approximately 6, 7, 8, something like that. Pretty young, which would have meant that she actually had been in New York for quite a long time, maybe 20 years ish. And I was wondering just like how much of a stranger and a visitor she might have felt like coming back home, because it doesn't sound like she came to Oklahoma that often to reconnect. And so, how much did she feel like a fish out of water? They didn't really address that in some way. And I feel like, Native communities tend to be very culturally different than a city like, New York or a big urban area. So like, how is she accepted by the people there, and how does she perceive herself when she gets there? They sort of missed that. They could have talked or shown more of that, I think, which would have been, it would have given it more layers, more, I don't know, just more,
yeah, absolutely,
something to it. So I'm glad you brought that up. That kind of made me think like, oh, there's a way they could have tweaked that, I think, to brought that more of that in. But it was
they
cool.
leave unexplained how much contact she's had with people, and
all the relationships are a little bit wonky, right? Like Biscuits comes out of nowhere, wasn't in any of the childhood scenes.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, that's the first character she meets.
Same with
pretty
the
much.
uncle, right?
That's fine, right? Uncle, we don't
see
know
him
the
in the
uncle,
beginning. But we do hear that maybe the Lopez brothers are
right. Yeah, but
up
that
to
was
no
it.
good.
He wasn't shown as
Them
part of
Lopez boys.
Yeah. And then even her relationship with Bonnie, we know that they were close as kids, but 20 years later, that doesn't mean that they have any kind of feelings or not feelings towards each other. If they haven't had that much contact, like, why would they even feel
they
any
got
kind
each
of
other's phone
kinship?
numbers, but they're not.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on?
I think
and
the
then also the grandma being estranged. Like,
20 years.
she's mad at the dad. Like, why is she mad at the little girl? Like, a lot of it
because she looks like her mom, and because she had lost her other daughter too, right? Like, so this is her second happening of losing a child, right? That's just that could be unbelievably heartbreaking, right? So I
don't know if you've seen A Broken Family, but people get mad over, from an outside perspective, what people perceive as some dumb shit. But I'm sure everybody listening at home can think of family members who are beefing over things that, from an outside perspective, you're like, that really? That's what you. Now, I
You
think they
didn't
just
like my casserole.
Yeah, I think they just I think they didn't realize, hey, 20 years is a long time to not talk to somebody. Like, had she been gone for 10 years,
yeah,
that would have, all the relationships would have made a little more sense. But if I ain't seen somebody in 20 years and we haven't
they got
talked,
right
there's just
back in
not
it
a
as
lot.
if yeah,
The pacing of the relationships and where they were relative to the contact and time that had passed kind of was a little wonky. I was able to let it go a little bit because once I saw them interacting, I thought the actual character interactions did a good job of filling the gap. But just hearing them say it's been 20 years was just like, hey, that's just a really long, change that number to 10, literally from just like a writing script perspective, and all of that dialogue just becomes retroactively a little bit better. I just know if I ain't seen somebody in 20 years,
there's not a whole lot of like familiarity.
But 10 years, absolutely. Especially, but as a 30-year-old, and for y'all as like 40-year-olds, I think 10 years is like a very perfect number of, hey, if I saw somebody I ain't seen since I was 20, or that y'all ain't seen since you were 30, I could see that making more sense. But as a kid, it's like, dog, that's just
yeah,
a little bit hard to believe. I can let it slide, but it's like, dude, y'all, it's not like y'all been besties for 20 years. I don't know. That was a little weird.
All right. So we poked a few holes in Echo. It wasn't a perfect show. I mean, ultimately, I enjoyed it for sure. Could it have been better? Yeah, it could have been better. But I'm glad I watched it. I think other people would be glad they watched it too. I also think the representation piece around like how they represented Native culture is important. They absolutely had cooperation with Native writers and consultants and things like that. And Alaqua Cox herself is Native, and obviously a lot of the actors are as well. So it doesn't.
Yeah, Wes, you were saying like it's just the cast from Reservation Dogs. There's at least like 5 or 6 of them in the show.
The deputy sheriff guy, the spirit is in it.
Bonnie, who is one of the 4 main characters.
Yeah, and she also voices. I don't know how to say
it. The grandfather is also a character in later seasons of Reservation Dogs. He's kind of like one of the most famous Native actors who's been around.
I recognized him from The Last of Us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's the guy in the cabin.
And they play an indigenous couple in that too.
Yeah, and he had a funny. Him and his wife were really funny in that show.
Oh, yeah,
his character wife. All right. So, anyways, Sav, this really is just a question for you.
Fire away.
As you oh, actually, you've already answered this. We don't need to ask it. We're good.
What
would you rate this?
Okay, podcast over.
Podcast over. No, what would you rate this kind of whatever scale you want, because you guys hate the rating scales. Where are you going with it? Sav, out of your 3 episodes so far, how you feeling?
I would give this show, so far from what I've seen, I'll give it like a solid 8.5.
Okay.
It is not a perfect show, but it's unique. It's refreshing. You're getting something different. You have a character who just has a lot of just character in terms of like their background and identity. That's something a little bit refreshing and different that you don't normally see. But they do a good job of, or not just weaving it into the narrative organically, but using it as a springboard to actually be creative with how you film and do the stuff. Like we talked about the sound piece, like when she's fighting the people and they switch between them grunting and fighting and all of that, and then her being deaf, but then you hear the heartbeats and then you don't hear a sound until she cracks someone's neck. That was them saying, hey, this character has this thing going. How can we use this to add a twist to what otherwise would just be a cool fight scene? Hey, she's a badass. She can throw good hands. Let's have her go around with Daredevil. Does she beat Daredevil? No, but we established, hey, Maya could throw some good hands. You know, hey, we're going to talk about the elements of her indigenous culture and like ethnicity and background and all of that, but we're also going to weave in this mildly spoilers element to it, you know, like with the train that we saw in the train scene, that also kind of gives a little bit of fleshed outness to her badassery, which we already know was earned. Like, there's a lot they do that they do a good job of taking what they've been given with this character and actually using it to give you fun, creative on-screen moments. And Like the opening sequence when they have the clay people origin story, I was like, what the hell is this? And when they use that to just lead into like a campfire or origin story, but it still ends up being relevant to the larger plot, I thought that's just really creative and thoughtful writing. And a show doesn't have to be perfect for you to say, y'all took the material you had and like had people who thoughtfully said, nah, we're gonna do something different. Because you could have easily have not had that stuff, and the show wouldn't have been worse for it. But this is what makes a Ghost show from being solid to memorable. Those types of moments, like, you had the black and white old time movie sequence where they're shooting the guns, and that explains why, Maya has such really good accuracy in the present. I'm like, yo, that was just them being really creative in how they told that story, because they could have easily have not done it in such a stylized way. And I hope that they do more of that the next 2 episodes with any other flashbacks we see. I hope we get more of that. But it's a creative show. The fight scenes are good. Like, Maya legit is beating people ass. There's even the scenes where other people are talking and you just see, oh, Maya don't know what the hell going on because she can't hear. But her still seeing her do her thing. Like, it's an entertaining show. And you don't have to be a Marvel fanboy or be caught up in everything to appreciate what it brings to the table. I think it's a solid show that's worth watching, and it's good in the way that WandaVision was good, and that the people who are creating it are having fun with the genre and the toolkit they've been given, and I want to really raise that. So at the very least, it's worth watching. It's easy to get into. It's not a hard watch. I think most people, especially if you're into Marvel stuff, should give it a watch.
Not Sav over here saying Echo is as good as WandaVision.
No, I never said it was as good, but
I
it's
know.
there's
I'm just
a
doing
personal,
the headline
there's
aggregator
there's a
thing.
stamp on it of like, oh, the people who made this really put their heart and soul into having fun, creative moments. Because there's lots of shows that don't do that, even though they're given characters and culture that could do some really fun stuff.
Brian, what are you rating
They're
this?
not playing it safe in this show. I mean, maybe I feel like there's definitely love and creativity going on as a spice on top, but it's not at the center of this.
Ooh, Brian
this
said highbrow
dish.
high this.
It's
Hi, Brian,
I
this.
think like a lot of recent Marvel products, this is there's another one that's just like, 6.5.
You mad it's not some art house shit?
6.5 out of 10. It's fine. Like, it works. There's some interesting things happening kind of on the fringes, the stuff that you mentioned. Some of the fight scenes are pretty good. I'm glad that they shot them wide. And like, she's an interesting character, but it just feels like there's so many missed opportunities in this. Like, if they could just let the creators go ham on what they want, what they probably really want to do, this would be excellent, right?
You felt like they had a shorter leash than I'm realizing. You think there's a shorter leash than what I'm giving them?
Absolutely. And I mean, just like, again, getting like Kingpin involved and all of that. The dialogue, the kind of the gaps in the plot line, all of that sort of thing, and it just being a 5-episode thing, like it's okay. It's okay. I agree that it's memorable because of the different things that it has going for it, right? Being part of a community that we don't get to see a lot of in TV, and also the different aspects about Maya. Those are all well and good, but ultimately, as a whole, I don't think the parts are greater than their sum.
Fair enough.
And so it's okay. Like, is it worth watching? Yeah, sure. Are you missing out if you don't watch it? No,
no,
not by any means.
I don't think you're missing out.
But like, it's short. The episodes are like 40 minutes each, 5 episodes. Yeah, watch it.
People commit to watching way worse shit that people hype up.
Is that the bar? Is that the standard of life that we want to live? That there's just way worse shit. Like,
everything ain't gonna be Breaking Bad.
There's so much out there that is good, that is close enough to Breaking Bad, that we should just spend our time like in that corner. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, it's cool.
I fully acknowledge that I'm burned out on shows that are meant to be high quality apartment viewing television, but ultimately it feels like the same stories from the same cultures and same types of people. I will fully admit that I am personally burned out on that, and I can only see so many high budget HBO shows that are really well produced, but ultimately is about a segment of like white American culture that I'm just like, yo, I am bored. Even if the
Yo, but
writing
that's
is
why
great, the acting is
reservation
great.
dogs exist. It's like that is good, right? And that is part of culture that we don't see, and it's made entirely by native folks, and it's really creative, and it's out there, and it's
Fair.
very good.
I haven't seen Reservation,
So
I haven't seen it, so fair. That's a fair point.
it's just like the stuff is out. It exists already.
Just gotta find it. Okay, fair.
I'm with Brian. I think I'm at a B minus. It was enjoyable in a lot of parts of it. Brian kind of ruined it for me in terms of like talking about how Kingpin wasn't really needed. This is good. That's why we have Brian on the show to, kill my dreams. So that's where I'm at. I like it. Brian, I was actually curious then, what has been a show on your radar that we should be watching? We could do a. I don't want to hear all the reasons. Just what's a show that. Wes, go check this out.
There's this great art house film. It's about the 1700s.
Hey, I've been watching.
We don't need that from you right now.
My sisters got me watching Slow Horses on Apple TV, which I've been enjoying.
Oh, I've watched a handful of episodes. I like it.
All right, tell us what's a show besides Reservation Dogs? So that one is good.
Yeah, Reservation Dogs is great. I talked about Scavenger's Reign before. Pluto. I mean, I'm talking about animation stuff, but like Pluto on Netflix is great.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's just like a ton of stuff. The latest season of Fargo, great.
I can't get into Fargo.
Well, that's sad for you. I don't know.
All right. Sounds
like
good. Scavenger's Reign. I still need to check that one out. I am intrigued by that one. Slow Horses. Brian, you might like it.
What is that even about?
I just said boring. I watched several episodes of it.
What is Slow Horses about? That sounds like a boring name for a show. Aren't horses meant to not be slow?
It's like
so far the premise is there's this group of like MI5, which is like FBI or CIA or whatever, and they're just like a bunch of fuck ups, and they get like relegated to this like no name like shame house where they just have to push papers all day, and they don't really they're not actually trying to solve any crimes, but then they sort of come across a situation where like one of them is really trying to solve the crime, and Gary Oldman is their boss, and he doesn't want them to do shit. He's like, stop doing an actual job because you're just gonna make things worse. Like, just be incompetent.
The bad news bears of like law enforcement.
I guess so, yeah. But I don't know where else we're going with this. Brian, you want to add anything?
No.
He's just kind of. Slow horses. He's like, you're not selling me on this.
They're called slow horses because they're bad at their job,
Yeah. Like when you think of your race horses, right? You got like the top tier of the stable, and then you got the guys who are not so good anymore. That's them. But then they're still trying to be, the top level. They want to be the top level agents. So they take on. They end up taking on a case.
Only one of them wants to be a top level agent. Everybody else seems cool with just like being at the bottom.
Okay, gotcha. I looked up the premise. Okay, I guess I get it. That makes sense, I suppose.
Yeah. All right, friends, let's wrap up there. Echo on Disney Plus right now and on Hulu. If you're interested, hit us up on @confidently_pod Instagram. Look forward to some more posts. Friends, we're out. We'll talk to you later. Happy New Year 2024.
We out.
Bye.